I'm standing at the top of Front Street here in Consett. What's interesting about this point is that back in the day, if you look down the street, you would see a cooling tower, a big chimney, and a very large gas container that was very much part of the British Steelworks here, which sadly closed in 1980. So the landmark that was at the bottom of the street just isn't here anymore. I'm standing in front of the Salvation Army Hall. What's interesting about this place is that in December of 1879, a world's first occurred here, and that was the commencement of a Salvation Army Corps band. So in December of that year, they started off here in Consett and played some tunes around the streets for Christmas. If you look at the buildings that have been here since the early 1900s and compare them to those built after 2000, you'll see that Consett mixes the old with the modern. Walking along the pedestrianised Middle Street, the contrasts are really there to see. Stone or brick, take your pick. These styles stand side by side. Wherever you look around Consett, you'll see evidence of the town's railways. They were everywhere. The railway tracks are now walkways for people, dogs and bicycles. Here on the Derwent Walk at Shotley Bridge, we'll come to the old site of its railway station. Built in 1867, it was part of a passenger and goods line until 1953. But with decreased use, the line closed completely in 1963, and the tracks were lifted in 1964. This picture dates from the early 1900s. And shows the station in use for passengers and freight. The station may be gone, but its legacy remains. These days the site is employed for leisure. The signage here gives credit to the local swords makers, who were known to produce some of the finest swords in the country. I'm standing on the bridge of Shotley Bridge, admiring these beautiful houses next to the River Derwent. This was the site that was the home of a few German families who came across here to make swords. I'm walking through Shotley Bridge near the river, and I've been pointed along this little street here where there should be a memorial for the Shotley Bridge swordsmiths who first established themselves here in 1691. Well, there's a note about the sword making. In the late 17th century, several families from Solingen in Germany settled on the banks of the River Derwent and set up a sword maker's business. Okay, I've been walking around this little set of houses down in Shotley Bridge, part of Consett, and I have just found the plaque. In walking down Swordsmakers Terrace, I have just noticed a plaque on the wall of one of the buildings. Beautiful part of Shotley Bridge, I've got to admit. Until I looked for it, I didn't even know this was here. All of the original swordsmakers' cottages were demolished in the 1960s. So this plaque is the only reference we have of the birth of steelmaking in northwest Durham. Before I left, I headed back to the bridge. I'm actually quite surprised of how beautiful this place looks. Looking down to the river, we can see some evidence of the stones that were cut to make sharpening tools to produce their swords. And that concludes 5 things about Consett.